Hey there, so thanks for taking the time to watch and listen to this video. What I want to do is, in the past, I've given testimonials and presented them, but I think it's probably more utility for me to demonstrate both from um, showing my own thought patterns as a coach and sharing stuff which may help you in your own journey more, kind of how I work with people, and to run through a few case studies of clients who I'm working with currently at the moment. And by popular demand, the first one that came up was this one. It's a guy I've worked with about 8 months, work shifts, got a lot going on. We've worked a lot on his emotional fitness as well as his physical fitness. And so I want to get in today kind of some of the broad strokes of that. I could, if I'm honest, speak for 60 to 90 minutes on this, but I want to keep it brief. So, give you an overview of this guy. He works shifts. He's got a child. He's just navigated a long-term, kind of messy divorce. Wasn't divorces are never that easy, but this one was a little bit bumpy for him. And I think because of that and the change in circumstances he was facing, he was experiencing a lot of struggles with his mental health in terms of depression, anxiety, so on and so forth. And at the time we started working together, he was medicated on depression medication. But I would say one of my big wins is that he is now off all that, and I think that's part and parcel of his dedication to the process and what we've got out of our time working together. So what he wanted to do initially, there was two sides to this. Probably the mental side was the bigger thing for me, was to give him a more positive outlook and vision on life and where he was going, and start reframing things, and to build a mental toolkit to help him become more resilient, less prone to getting sucked into bouts of anxiety and depression, and to just be unfuckable with mentally. Physically, we wanted to lose a bit of weight and run a marathon. So I'm all about people wanting to lose weight to feel more fuckable. There's nothing wrong with that, right? We want to look more attractive. Let's just own it. But there was a aesthetic goal and a performance goal here, which is what I really love. He needed from me structure because he lacked that. He didn't have anything going on. He was kind of like floating around in terms of how he was living his life. He wanted accountability, and that's something I think is big on the first stages of coaching. Now, if you imagine it like this, I kind of describe it as you need that accountability a bit more on the front end, and then over time you need less and less of that, and it's more just like a support and a check-in. But he needed that, and he wanted honesty, and that was one of the big things for me as a coach, is to say that I will always be honest with you, because if I'm not, then you're not going to get to where you want to get to, right? And I think that's really important to say. So that's what he needed from me. That felt good. And yeah, then we went from there. So my initial thoughts with this guy were that the longer term thing was something to be mindful of, and in particular building a really powerful, strong and visceral vision of the life he could now step into, moving on from quite a traumatic period through divorce and some kind of career changes as well. But whilst being mindful of that and creating that vision, I also wanted to really bring it into the moment, and going from where he was, which was a place of stagnation and being stuck, to creating a shift. So we did a number of things, and whenever I work with anyone, I generally bucket what we do into the big overarching theme of working on the relationship you have with yourself. I know that people, many times, they'll come in and they'll start life coaching, and it'll be about improving their career or their other relationships. But I believe, through my experience, that if we start with addressing the relationship with yourself, indirectly all those other things will really improve, because you just have a better internal narrative, a better support system, and a better set of tools to help you deal with life. And so if I further break down the relationship of self, I can kind of further categorize that into 4 other buckets, which I think combine to make everything that kind of matters. Firstly is movement. Physical movement and expression is a big part of it. Secondly is nutrition, simply what we're putting in our body in terms of food and drink. Thirdly is energy, and that is the way you're spending your time day to day, and in particular, looking at things like your sleep and recovery, which are really important. And from that place, we're looking at also like routines and habits, etc., etc. And then lastly, emotion, which is what I'd say is emotional fitness, which is the big thing for me. The big thing for me as a coach, it's like we don't realize how much we need to work on this. And for many of us, we can go into these things, oh, I just need to, better daily habits, better nutrition, bit of a workout plan. But in my experience, the working on your emotional fitness, dealing with things that you around your mindset, are the things that long term will yield the biggest potential opportunity for you to grow and experience a more fulfilled and joyful life. It's just a harder thing to create buy-in for because it's a longer term process, if I'm honest. So anyway, with this guy, what we did, we actually addressed like the four different things, and I gave him action items on each of the buckets. Generally now with most people, I prioritize movement first as a way to create a shift, quite simply because if you're going from a place of like not making progress to needing to shift, movement is the best way to create a feeling of momentum. You feel better emotionally from moving in a way that feels good for you. And from that place, like things start to shift, you get a more confidence in what you're capable of, and things just open up for you. So yeah. So with this guy, we actually did all the four things, and gave him simple stuff to do on each one of the four, because he was simply at a place where I'd say is rock bottom. That's a bit of a harsh way to describe it, but he recognized that he needed to take serious, drastic action and was committed to doing that. And so I would generally err away from doing that for most people, but for some people it does work, especially if you're kind of experiencing a significant amount of pain. You seem way more motivated then to be able to change a lot more than if you're not experiencing that much pain. So movement for this guy, he was like a low training age, so minimal experience in terms of exercise, but enough for me to kind of give him some kind of like simple movements to get into. And if you're concerned that you've not got really much exposure to exercise or structured training, that's absolutely fine. It doesn't matter where you are or what point you're at, we can get you going. So the program I put him on combined strength and conditioning. What that means is like it's some strength and some cardio, basically some weight training and some cardio every session. So I got him feeling good, pumping blood into his muscles, and then getting him breathing like heavily every session. So he felt like he was doing something. Every session was really simple in terms of the wording. There was a clear intention, which is big for me in terms of training. The intention is the thing that helps you understand what you should feel. All right, I hope that makes sense, but that's really important for me in movement prescription these days. I kept it really similar for him for about the first 4 weeks, just because for me, developing a practice around movement is about being clear on intention, and that takes a few weeks to get your head around. This isn't entertainment for me. Like, you should find movement engaging, but this should be something you really want to focus on and engage in a way that creates a practice and a ritual that you want to learn what we're doing, and not just go, well, what am I doing now because I need variation because of novelty. I want you to really kind of embrace what this can be. Nutrition, his essence, and this is really the exception. I say most people, 99% of people, I don't do kind of tracking in terms of like calories and macronutrients, but he is very data based, very engineer science based in his job. So tracking seemed like a good choice for him, because I think he could approach it in such a way as to not get emotionally attached to what the numbers mean. And it was a great thing for him to be able to create awareness of what he was eating, and then give him some immediate sense of control of what he needed to do to achieve the outcomes he wanted. So the calorie target we actually put him on was over 2,000 calories. He wasn't starving by any stretch. He actually said he felt pretty full most days, but he got some results really quickly and started to see a shift. For most people, though, I would go more of a habit-based approach, where we look at each meal in turn, we look at refining those things, and then we have discussions about things like snacking, emotional eating, etc., long term. Energy. So we talked about optimizing his sleep around shifts, which is always hard when you work shifts because you don't have what is known as a natural circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm is basically where your body gets into like a daily rhythm of waking up and going to bed at the same time. After me working shifts for 13 years, it's probably taken me 7-8 years to develop a circadian rhythm. And I feel for you if you work shifts because you just feel constantly like jet lagged. But there are ways we can optimize it, and that is simply trying to honor an amount of sleep cycles in every opportunity to sleep. So sleep cycle is generally 90 minutes. We try and plan your sleep intentionally so you sleep in these clear sleep cycles. So you try and wake up at the time when you will probably feel most alert. And then for this guy, what we did, because he didn't do nights, is we tried to optimize and create some rhythm around the days he's doing lates and the days he's off. So we had a regular sleep schedule around those days, but early's early, so you get up and go, right? We committed to simple things like no more snooze, committing to daily action for himself, which I'd say is like a self-care practice at the start of the day, which was really the introduction to the practice of emotional fitness, which I'm going to speak about next. But for me, if you are able to logistically get this stuff in at the start of the day, these self-care based actions, you are so much better equipped to deal with whatever you're going to have in front of you that day. So emotional fitness, like my biggest thing, right? I'm in love with all of this because it's simply the effects I've seen it have on me and many of the clients I work with now. So I always start with movement first because it's the thing that creates a shift, and then emotional fitness is generally the second thing I'll push people towards starting to try and implement. So yeah, emotional fitness for this guy. I start with meditation. He'd dabbled in it, but not developed a consistent practice. And the consistency is key with meditation, I believe, because it's like a skill, it's like a muscle. The more you train it, the easier it is to use it. And the compounding effect of meditation is one that takes time, but when you start to notice the difference, it like snowballs into something that you see as non-negotiable. It's like the most impactful thing I've done for my mental health and probably physical health because of that. Journaling, which is really powerful because I think we have these thoughts going around in our head, but they just circle around and it's hard to make sense of them. So journaling, I have found in my experience, helps you to compile those thoughts in a way to arrive at a conclusion. So we did a bit of that. And then daily Stoic. So Stoic meditation is something I've been into for a number of years. I think one of my clients got me into it years ago, and then it's something I've run with and have given to many of my people I work with now. And it's just a brilliant way to frame your day and to create some kind of like perspective on the things you might be worrying about, which maybe don't matter a bit. So the point in these three practices with meditation specifically is to create awareness. Journaling is to empty the mind, and daily Stoic really helps you gain perspective. So that's, if you imagine every day you're doing these three things, okay, I'm going to create awareness of my thoughts. I'm not trying to silence them. What thoughts are coming up? Let them go. I'm going to empty my mind. What's coming up for me right now? And when I say journaling, it could be 2 lines. Like some days I'm busy. I write 3 or 4 lines. Other days I'll really have the time and the opportunity to get into it and more comes out. And then the Stoic idea kind of gives you some perspective to move into your day into a positive way. So that was the initial snapshot of the 4 things we did. Again, if that seems overwhelming, don't worry. We would probably just with most people go with the movement side of it first, get you feeling good through the movement expression, and then we start massaging the other things in. But it's very, very individualized. The long-term journey with this guy has been amazing. We've gone through different progressions of movement, different cycles of kind of training, like bodybuilding focused, and we prepped him for a marathon, which he did really well at with short-term notice while going through a significant career change and finalizing his divorce. And I'm going to share something from that experience, which has been the biggest win for me I've seen for this guy. And I can see, it's the thing for me that I look for in coaching. I'm not about the before and afters. Indirectly, I know you will look better in your body if you work with me and you embrace what we do. But there's a deeper thing I want to help you with. I've just seen the energy isn't spelt wrong there. That's annoying. Anyway, so We've gone through understanding nutrition, developing more of a mindful, intuitive way of eating without tracking. We've refined energy in a fluid way day to day, developing practices that can exist in a state of flux. And we've had to begin again a few times, and that's honestly one of the big lessons for me, is that these practices will work until they don't. And life is constantly in change and flux, and you've got to be okay with going, well, this is what works, but don't get attached to that, because something's going to come along, is going to change your capacity to do that. And so you've got to mold and adapt and overcome it really quickly. And so I want to finish by sharing with you the big moment of shift, which this guy shared with me when he did it a few weeks ago. And as he was running around the marathon, he's run a couple before. And if you've ever run a marathon, there's a point in which stuff just generally starts to hurt way more. It's a physical pain that it becomes apparent. Certainly for me, having run a couple, the second one I did, this was disgusting. And the internal narrative for this guy previously, he said, would have been one of very much like self-loathing, like, you're a waste of space, etc. What are you doing? And he noticed this chatter start to arise and was able to transition that into the positive. And so this for me is like, wow, what a thing to be able to do, to notice these things arise in your head and not only just not get attached to them, but transition a negative into a positive and to become your own biggest cheerleader as you're doing something. And I think that's the thing to kind of finish on here, is that the internal narrative we have, generally for most of us, in my experience, maybe the N=1 is just, I'm biasing it based on the people I come into contact with, is generally quite negative. And so imagine if the voice in your head was instead positive, saying, you know what, you're doing really fucking well here. Let's keep going. You're doing great. Keep going with this. Instead of the negative things many of us feel day to day, saying you're not capable of this, you're not capable of that, yada, yada, yada. So yeah, the moment of shift. The principles of what we did here are, we gave him clear structure to remove ambiguity. I think that's really useful for people sometimes. If you're lost and stuck, having simple structure that you can adhere to based on your life really helps create a shift and a bit of momentum. And lastly, like, mental fortitude comes from creating awareness. This for me, if I can leave you with anything, if you've listened all this way through, is that if you want to feel more mentally resilient, you've got to engage in the fact of becoming more mentally aware. And that is achieved solely through developing a practice of emotional fitness to create awareness, notice what's arising without attachment to like good or bad, learning to understand emotion, the power of emotion, leveraging it for the good, letting go of it when it's less than good, and just creating some kind of control over what's going on up here and changing it from a negative to a positive. So yeah, that was what we did. If any of that relates or resonates with you, and I'll give you a sales pitch now. I fucking hate doing it, but this is what I'm here for, and this is what I do. And my mission in life is to help more people arrive at the place that we've got this absolute legend to, and we're still working, going, growing. Then drop me a message. We can have a conversation. The way I work now is pretty simple. I'll work with you free for 14 days to create a shift. And that 14 days is for two reasons, right? It's for me to see if you're a good fit for me, and it's for you to see if I'm a good fit for you. A try before you buy. But I'll be honest, like, it needs to work for both of us. This is a mutual relationship, and one in which you need to be in a place where you're okay with the idea of embracing the discomfort of change, which is part of the process. All right. There's no easy way around this. Change is hard, but I can help you make it slightly easier by creating clarity on the minimum amount of change we need to make to help you get to where we want to get to. If you've got these big lofty goals and desires and aren't quite sure how to navigate it, and it all seems way off, that's what we work through when we work together. So yeah, if that's what you want to have a chat about, let me know. If not, and you just got some use out of this and you feel like you can take it forward in your life, then cool, crack on, Have a great day, and thank you for listening. See you soon.